Hey, this is Kip Weston. I've had a lifelong fascination with adventure, whether that's climbing, mountaineering, or even diving into history. I'm obsessed with uncovering stories from extraordinary people, people who break from the average and become outliers. Now I want to share their stories with you. So, up first is Meghan Buchanan. Meghan's resume of accomplishments is about a mile long. She's an aerospace engineer that has climbed the highest peak on all seven continents. Yes, that does include Mount Everest. She also has the ambition of completing the Adventurer's Grand Slam, which is the seven highest mountains on each continent, and reaching the North and South Pole. She's already knocked the South Pole off her impressive to-do list and is planning to visit the North Pole in 2025. If that trip gets the green light, she'll be the first US woman to complete the Adventurer's Grand Slam. I've linked Megan's social in the description below and highly recommend checking out her website, ggrit or grit.com. It's an acronym for gratitude, growth, integrity, and tenacity. Virtues and qualities that Megan claimed helped her achieve so much. I ask about those qualities and more in our upcoming conversation. So let's get into it. Well, thanks so much. I mean, I'm the first question I thought of is like, how does a goal like the Explorers Grand Slam or even the Seven Summits get on your radar? When
Um,
are you introduced to that title?
yeah, it took a long time to get to that place where I even knew what that was or that I wanted to do it. But like I was just saying, I'm a middle kid with a learning disability, so I think I always had this drive. It was never good enough for myself. But I grew up, the outdoors was a huge part of my life growing up and my therapy and where I built my confidence. So I would always do a lot of cute hikes, but the seven summits really came about after a horrendous femur break, snowboarding, and told that I'd have a wheelchair cane the rest of my life. And my carrot to get through it, and a titanium allergy, was thinking about hiking back to Everest Basic Camp again or doing Kilimanjaro again. And I had become so strong from going through that accident and that recovery mentally and physically. I did do those things again. And they were so easy in comparison to before. And so then I wanted to go higher and I did Aconcagua. And then that was cute. And I, and
Cute.
then I
It's like a
actually,
month hike, right?
I know, right? It was, I loved it. It was so amazing. And it was while drinking wine down in Mendoza. I met this really cool woman who was only 29, and that was her seventh summit. And I was like, when did you do Everest? She did it when she was 19. Her last name is Mallory. She is a descendant of George Mallory. And so
Yeah.
her dad and her had climbed it as a family. And over a glass of wine, it was in Mendoza, I had decided I'm going for it. I'm going to learn the skills to do this, to become a mountaineer, and I'm going to do the seven summits. And then really, going through that, someone did start talking about the Explorers Grand Slam to me. And I was like, what? Fewer women have done that. I've got to do that one too. So
Right.
that's how it just kind of came together.
How quick are you to like hear about the seven summits and being like, I think I should do that?
It's not quick. I think I decided it was probably around like maybe early 40s, like 40, 41, that I really decided, yeah, I'm going to do the seven summits, because I honestly think that a lot of the big mountains, first of all, it takes some time to gain the proper skills, experience, that sort of thing. But I think really the biggest key in a lot of it is the mental and emotional strength to get you through
Right.
those mountains, and that willingness to suffer, that willingness to push through all the adversity and all the elements instead of just, crying and going home. I think that is why a lot of people end up doing it later. You just don't have in your 20s. I don't know that I had the mindset to push through that sort of dedication, and pain to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I've looking at kind of your experience growing up. I don't know if I'd agree with that because can you talk more about your dyslexia diagnosis and how you challenged maybe the notion that, hey, you're going to be this certain way. And you're like, well, no, screw you. I'm going to be the best at school. I'm going to go be a rocket scientist.
Well, yeah. So, and earlier when I talked about how the outdoors was my therapy, that was my therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed when I was 7. I'm lucky to have been diagnosed, but I was verbally and emotionally abused by a teacher. And I refused to read. And that's how my mom's like, wait a minute, my child's smart. I don't know what's happening here. So, I was diagnosed and we're so sorry, Miss Buchanan, your child is dyslexic. She won't achieve much academically. And my mom literally sat me down and she's like, sweetheart, you can be anything you want to be. You are just going to have to work harder than everyone else. And that starts today in this house. That's what we do. And so my mom normalized it for me. But even with a super supportive family, there's still so much shame and embarrassment. My dad was a Rhodes Scholar to MIT, brilliant physicist and engineer, brother, sister, brilliant. They were so kind and loving to me. But of course, I felt like an idiot next to them. That was my own thing. And so the outdoors is
Yeah.
where I excelled. And so the outdoors is where I threw myself. The
Mm.
outdoors is where I built my confidence to put into school. And so, I mean, college beat me up. I had to take Calc 3. I had to take it 3 times, or Calc 2 3 times. I crawled over that finish line. I graduating college, I did not think I would make it as an engineer. I felt so horrible about myself. I hid it. I lied about who I was. And so that carries with you. So, yes, I was building this drive and this dedication, but in the same time, feeling so horrible about myself. And I was never good enough for myself. So that manifests into, I'll show myself, I'll show everybody else, this is what I'm going to do. So through that journey and through age, you do start to realize, oh, well, they haven't kicked me out of engineering yet. Apparently, I'm doing an okay job. And through all of that, I just stayed with the outdoors. And so for me, yes, putting neurodivergence aside, getting through engineering, being a female in engineering is another
Right.
thing. And
Yeah.
then the accident I had at that point in my life in my 30s, when that accident happened, yeah, my mind instantly just went to, that's not going to be my destiny. We're going to fix this. We're going to work harder than anybody else. And so, yeah, I realized, wow, I can do this. And when I realized this whole concept of grit, which I call gratitude, growth, resilience, integrity, and tenacity, then when it came to the 7 summits, I was like, I have no idea if I can do this or not, but I'm going to put everything into it and see if I can do this too. And so, it's just carrying on those lessons you've learned from we've all struggled with something as children. This is life. We all struggle. We all have challenges. But when you can
Right.
start to realize the strength that it's giving you and then put that into purpose, into something else you're doing, it takes away the pain from struggle and difficulty. It makes it more purpose driven and you're unstoppable.
Yeah, that's an interesting mindset switch. I really hadn't thought about that till you talked about that, where if it's aligned with a mission or a purpose, it's not just kind of this spinning of the wheels of like, oh gosh, woe is me. It's like, no, this
Yeah,
is fuel and I can
it's
work
not
towards a goal.
yeah, when you own your narrative, you take away like suffering ends. It could be the
Yeah.
same amount of literal pain, but you don't suffer anymore because it's purpose driven. And so, yeah, you get into this mindset of like, okay, this is gonna hurt like a mother, but I know I'll get through the other side. And it's just from that experience of knowing your survival skills, knowing that you'll pull through, and being willing to put yourself like through that fire in order to get to the
Yeah.
other side where you want to be.
Is this something only life can teach you, or is this something that your parents were great at instilling in you?
I think it's nature of nurture, right? I think it's
Yeah.
different. I think it's so different from everyone. But
Yeah.
I do think, especially now that I really talk to everything from kindergarten all through like corporate America, it also, as we're younger and we don't have the experience under our belt, you can be told something. It's hard for us to really conceptualize it when we've never experienced any of it, though. So, again, even though my parents, you can be anything you want to be, be who you are, love yourself. They can tell me that forever and ever, but I do have to learn that myself.
Right.
And I had to learn that for myself. I had to keep pushing myself to the absolute edge to finally be good enough for myself. And that is the true, like that to me is the true summit. All of this was to find who I am and be okay with that and love that. And like, so now, eh, you get obsessed a little bit about the summit, but then that just falls away when you really realize what every expedition is supposed to be about. And it is that greater goal of just figuring out like who you are deep inside.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said.
Thanks.
Um, and was your dad the one who introduced you to the outdoors and kind of like opened this outlet for you?
Yes, absolutely. And again, like that was such a my dad also like engineer, and I'm not the typical engineer, but he wasn't either. And he was in diving in college. He was always mountaineering, doing his thing. He never
Mm,
really got super technical, but he loved it. And that was our thing together. Like I said, I've got two siblings.
yep.
They weren't really into it, but I was. And I don't know. I can't really separate at this point in my life whether I was really just doing it because I knew he loved it and it was something, that look in his eye when he saw me like excelling past him.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think I really hung on to that. But then with I always remember enjoying it and loving it because I was good at it, but it definitely did turn into something that was my joy and my love
Yeah.
as well, to be able to carry on. So it was just a special time to be able to spend with my dad, that it was just him and me. And that made me fall in love with it.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Where it's
Yeah.
like it starts as a family thing and your dad's like, "Come on, let's go." And then you eventually independently start to see the merit in doing stuff outdoors and challenging yourself and
Like it builds your joy because you have good memories of it and makes you feel good. So then you of course are naturally more attracted to it.
right.
Yeah, but it was something where in the outdoors, especially as a kid, and my dad and I were always hiking, even through like college. I in Colorado, I went to see you. He was down Carl Springs a little bit. We'd still meet on weekends and go hike and we'd work through things. I could be 100% myself in the outdoors. I didn't have to pretend I wasn't dyslexic. There was no
Yep.
one making fun of me. I could be me, and I loved that feeling.
Yes. I
Yeah.
can relate to that. Nature has a beautiful like indifference to who you are. It doesn't seem to care really about anything. Like
Yeah, that's what I love. Like, and we can talk about when we talk about mountains. That's one thing too, where I love nature and the mountains because it doesn't care. It doesn't care how much money you have. Doesn't care if you're male or female. Doesn't
Yep.
care what color you are. It will
Yep.
treat you the same.
Yeah,
Yeah, which I
totally.
love.
Going into mountains, can you tell me about hiking Kilimanjaro with your dad?
Yeah, so that one. So again, like I did if anyone's familiar with Colorado, we call them 14ers.
Yep.
There's, over 50 14ers, over 14,000 feet in Colorado. And I was doing that forever with my dad. And I had gone and done Everest base camp with some friends. And I'd also done like Sanctuary and Annapurna base camp. But one
Okay. So
day,
you've been exposed to high altitude hiking.
yeah, I'd
Just
say maybe more like to 16,000 feet type of thing.
got it.
And then my dad, I remember, called me one day and he was like, I'm thinking about climbing kit. He didn't even get it out. It was like, yes.
Yep.
And so, yeah. And so we went, and my little sister and his wife and a friend of mine, for the first time I was 29. And it was just awesome. It was so fun. It was such a new experience. And to be able to do it with my father was so amazing to me. And I just remember we did Western Breach, we were at high camp, and everyone else was like in the tent, but my dad and I are like, let's go hike out to see the crater. And yeah, and he just had this moment where he's like tearing up, and I'll tear up just talking about it. He's like, I just want you to know how proud I am of you
Mm,
and what you've done in your life. And I was like, are you feeling okay? Like, why you said? He's like, no. This is one of the happiest moments of my life. And we had that moment together. And unfortunately, my dad passed away 3 years after that from a head injury. And so it remains with me. My favorite of the seven summits was Kilimanjaro because it was with him. And
yep.
he is the one that installed like that love for the outdoors. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear about your dad passing.
Yeah,
But that's
thanks.
a great story. Did you feel, I mean, stop me if it's too deep, but like, did you feel his presence on like the other six you had to do? Could you feel him like cheering you on?
Oh my gosh, I love no, my dad is with me on everything. And
Yeah.
we actually on Kilimanjaro, we had talked about, he's like, I want to go to Everest Base Camp. And so
Oh, yeah.
we were going to plan it and do it. But no, my dad is with me on everyone. If you're a Star Wars fan, the original one, and they're on like with all the Ewoks, and remember like they're at the party at the end of the movie, and you've got like the ghosts of Obi-Wan
Yes.
and Darth
Yeah.
Vader. I feel like I have a panel of spirits that go with me, and my dad's one. And every climb I do, I make a playlist, and it can be up to like 200 songs. I'll just put it on shuffle. And anytime I'm feeling a little nervous, I start talking to my dad. I'm like, okay, dad, keep me strong, keep me safe, keep me smart. And that song, his song, will always come on. And I'm like, okay, we got this. Or I'll just talk to him on a ridge and be like, you liking this one? This one's good. And he's absolutely with me. And especially as I get older, I just get so in touch with, like, my dad's not gone and he
Yep.
lives through me. And I'm so honored to like have, I feel like, the best of him and the best of my mom, to carry on. And it just makes me really proud.
Yeah. Could you speak a little bit more about like what your mom's relationship was like with you hiking and all these adventures? It sounds like your dad was this huge cheerleader of like, go get it. Is your mom more like a tempered? Like, what was that relationship like?
I love that question. So I always talk about, my dad taught me like this quest for adventure
Yep.
and compassion and pushing myself intellectually. And my mom was more like a sleeper cell, where such a good mother literally let me idolize my father. They had
Yep.
gone through a divorce, but let me do that. And her lessons were kind of planted. And it wasn't until he died, and then I really started, in my early 30s, really becoming strong. My mom is the strongest woman I know. And she taught me to pick myself back up. And those lessons now are so vital in what I do. And so all these crazy things, like once I'll be like, Mom, I'm going to go to Spain and run with the bulls. She's like, okay, well, hope everything goes well. I'm like, okay, great. Now, she never let me know that she's totally freaking out on the other, but she never
Right.
let me do that. And so it is fun. My mom's one of my biggest supporters. She's not on social media. She doesn't know, she doesn't listen to any of my podcasts, anything. So she also is like, not, I'm just not like, what I've done isn't a big deal to her, really, because she's like, okay, whatever. Which I like keeps me a little bit humble and keeps me grounded when I need like good feedback from her. But I do know on Everest, she got very, very nervous. I actually was able to call her like from base camp. And I remember I called her once. I was in tears because I was going through something emotional, but she could hear it in my voice. And she literally was like, you know what? I have to go right now. I have to go to the store. I'm so sorry. I love you. Call me later. Bye. And hung up. And I'm like, my mom just hung up on me, and I'm calling her from Everest Base Camp, about to go for summit. And I had a moment where I'm like, should I be upset? And then I was like, you know what? I think she's terrified. And I'm like, all right. I went to sleep. I called her the next day. It was all good. But, she is human. She hopes it'll stop soon. But yeah, but she supports it. She totally supports it. And she just wants me to be happy. That's all she wants.
Right. Like any good parent.
I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of like picking yourself up, do you mind sharing that? First of all, it's the worst bone break I've ever seen. Like the story of how you broke your femur.
Yeah. It was not good.
It is like a traumatizing photo of an X-ray.
Yeah, it was not the smartest decision I've made in my life how it happened. But yeah, I mean, back bowl's a veil. It's a Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, we had epic powder, and it was incredible. And we really went around and found where huge stash of powder. I was behind a girlfriend who ex-US ski team. So we were hauling.
Yep.
And I was on the tree line in powder, which that is so stupid to do. I will never do it again. But anyway, we cut through, and I hit a down tree under powder at about 25 miles an hour. So femur bone, I hit it dead on. I decapitated it, spiral fractured down, muscles ripped off, and I laid there bleeding internally. Ski patrol couldn't find us. So I was there about over an hour before they found me. I just remember like my teeth had started chattering. I stuck my glove in my mouth. I had broken a molar,
Mm.
but they found me, and it was, it was a gnarly rescue. The director of the ski patrol had said in 20 years, it was the worst accident he'd seen where someone lived. So I was like, that's not
Wow.
you know, so I'm sure there's been much worse since, but yeah, so emergency surgery, and they had to put a 14-inch rod in my leg, and the pain involved with this was like nothing. I mean, it was like nothing I've ever experienced. But then it got worse because I wasn't getting better, and I was in physical therapy 2 to 3 days a week. I ended up having to leave my job engineering
Yep.
in Denver because it moved, and I had to move. I moved up to Vail full time. I'm with doctors. I'm with physical therapists. It was Team Meghan. But the one thing I learned about it was I had to focus again, like my mom had taught me when I was a kid. I've got to focus on what I'm grateful for. So that was my carrot. I'm like, okay, I had friends that were going to do a Everest base camp again. And it was a year or more away. And I was like, I want to do this. And so I just kept that dangling out there, kept working at it, but 24/7 pain, insane pain. It never eased. And chronic pain starts to really take its toll on you, and depression, but I kept going. And after a year and a half of this, my doctor had stayed with me. He was passing me to all the famous doctors up here in
I'm so
Vail.
sorry. So it's a year and a half of intense pain.
Year and a half of
Oh,
physical therapy, intense pain. And I wasn't, yeah. And I'm burning through my savings. I left work. I
yeah.
just so I had a cane full time, and I could not go up a flight of stairs without holding onto a railing and my cane. We
Right.
finally, eliminated everything else it could be. And it wasn't my physical therapist, like, I think you're allergic to titanium. And at the time, you couldn't test for it. And my surgeon was definitely open to it. Finally got permission to have the surgery. They took it out. And literally within 1 month, I could walk upstairs unassisted. And then within 6 months, I was doing Everest Base Camp. And so, yeah, apparently I was allergic to titanium. But that amount of pain I had been through, that's what I was talking about, where it toughened me up so much of how you push through the extreme physical pain to reach a goal. And
Yeah.
so that was magic to me. Like that was
And over a
magic.
long time period too.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
the long
okay, I'm gonna do
endurance.
breathing exercises. That might help
Yeah,
for the day
yeah.
of, but for a
I
year and a
mean,
half.
the negative is being in physical therapy up here in Vail, you're around like athletes, and in that time period, I recall about two different athletes, more collegiate, taking their own lives from everything from the depression to, their only shot in scholarship at college was gone. And it that chronic pain affects your mental health horribly, and it does
Yep.
not have a happy ending for a
Yep.
lot of people. And that's another thing I was so grateful for, being able to like have friends and community that supported me and be able to push through it. And so then, yeah, so I did Everest Base Camp, and then I was like, I want to do Kilimanjaro again. So I went and did it a second time, and yeah, ran across the top to get there for sunrise. I left the group. I was like, I gotta go, because I was going to meet my dad, Spirit, at the top for sunrise, which I did.
Yep.
Yeah, and then after that, I was like, okay, yeah, I need to go higher. So that's why I decided on Aconcagua.
That's so incredible.
It
That's
was,
just like,
yeah, it was crazy for me to believe. Like I was like, wow, not too long ago, I had a cane. A cane was going to be my life.
yeah.
And
And to not even go from a flight of stairs to, I don't know, can you detail more about how high is Aconcagua? It's the highest mountain in South America.
yeah, in Argentina. So that one is just under 23,000 feet.
So from not doing a flight of stairs to 23,000 feet.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Yep.
And I'm like, all right, let's do this. Yeah, I never really thought that I would be doing it. But again, it was that component of understanding your pushing past your emotional and your mental limits and pushing past the belief and negative voices in your head, because that's something that unites all of us. We
Right.
all have negative voices. You can have, the CEO of a company guarantee something happens. There's that little voice in there like, what are you doing? You don't belong here. You shouldn't be doing this. We all have that. And now I was, though, giving myself data to be like, you know what, little voice, I think you may be wrong because I just
Yeah.
that. So we're going to keep going, whatever you say. So that's the
Is
other part that really grows for you, is being able to combat those negative voices telling you can't.
is there an element too where you're like, I've been given a blessing of a working body, and now I want to see what I can do with this puppy. Like I know what it's like to not do a flight of stairs, and now I want to test this.
I made myself a promise that first of all, especially like as a woman too, I made myself a promise that I would never hate my body again. I would never hate my body again.
Yep.
Because what I realized was all the times like, oh, I'm fat or whatever, like my body was in great working shape. And so I would and then, and especially on these climbs, and you meet so many people that, you know, have missing appendages, who are
Yeah.
blind, who have all these things where I'm like, I will never hate my working body again.
Yep.
And yeah, I've really tried hard to do that. I'm so thankful. So lucky.
Can you talk to me about the Aconcagua prep?
Um, yeah, I mean, that one's kind of that one was a little more for me. I really had not been doing technical mountains like the Western Breach on Kilimanjaro. We actually got to a point, it was pretty hairy. I realized we should have had crampons on a lot of it, we
Mm,
didn't. So a lot of this stuff was just kind of bliss and not knowing any better and just muscling through it. So I did my best to, I had crampons and I'm in Colorado. So I'm like, oh, I'll go play around in here. And even on Aconcagua, I look back on a lot of it. We probably should have been roped up to at least to each other. We weren't. But so my prep was more just reading, making sure I thought I had the right gear. But for that one, for me, again, that one was more just strong body, strong mind, and just loving it. So just muscling through it.
yep.
But I did start to realize again, like, okay, if I'm going to do more, I need to learn skills. I really need to get serious about learning mountaineer. I'm a hiker. I need to
Yep.
become a mountaineer. And so again, like that part of knowing that for what I want, I'm willing to work hard for it. I refuse to be that person, which kills me on so many mountains, that show up. They're literally opening a box of mountaineering boots and don't know how to put crampons on. I was like, oh, sweet. I did not want to be that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Aconcagua, I probably should have been more prepared. But if you're ever going to go and you aren't, like, at least be open. Like, don't have an attitude. Be open to absolutely learning from people and your
Right.
guide. Like, listen to them. And I listened, I absorbed, and I executed what they told me to do, and it was successful.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. You can't start with experience in any discipline. You have to start somewhere.
Exactly. And that's why so many people too, especially as you get older, we hate failing. We hate not being good at something. We hate, and actually what's so weird is you start to look at little kids always make fun of each other. They're horrible. But as we get older, adults, you're the only one beating yourself up for things. The majority of people around you, they're not giving you a hard time for being new at something. Most people are actually pretty encouraging. It's your own self telling yourself you can't do it. You've got to be willing to be vulnerable again and go through that growth stage. You've got to be willing to grow, and growth hurts. Growth
Yep.
is painful. Growth is hard. You want to give up.
Embarrassing too, right?
It's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
But when you can learn to put that aside and keep choosing to take another step forward, that's how you get there. And so when I talk about grit with people, growth, I'm like, that's the hard part. That's going to be the hardest part for you. If you can learn to work through that, then you can repeat this cycle of grit to achieve your next goal and your next goal. And the biggest thing though is when you technically fail or don't reach your goal, it it isn't as catastrophic as you thought it was going to be. It's just like, oh, well, that didn't work out for me. I'm going to try it again. So
Yeah,
it loses its pain
right.
the more you do it.
On that, you have a mantra I'm definitely stealing where you split between disappointment and
Devastation.
devastation.
Yeah.
Like, can you explain more on how you split those
Yes.
two?
I love that you asked that because I think that that's one of my top things to try to explain to people to help ease their life. And look, we all there on the spectrum of suffering and horrible things in your life, there is a wide spectrum. No matter if you are, you are in the worst of situations, a lot of cases out of this country, and the best of situations, whatever you think is a challenge and painful, the one thing in common is you feel the same way about it. It
Mm,
literally can be someone who's like, I just had my nails done and I have a huge event and I can't believe everything just got messed up, or, that.
right,
But the pain they feel is the pain they feel to
right.
someone who is literally dying of um hydration, dehydration, or starvation. And I don't want to equate those things exactly, but I mean, I'm just saying when you go through a challenge, it could be horribly different.
Right.
And on one side of the spectrum, you're like, what are you even complaining about? But the thing is, you still feel pain. So people need to really start understanding the difference between something that is disappointing and something that is devastating. Because most people say, oh my God, it's so devastating. It's not devastating. It is a challenge. It is disappointing. You're going to have to change some things. But I like to say devastation is a loved one dying.
Yep.
Devastation is it can be things like a job, like completely losing your job and you've got 3 people to feed. Devastating is losing your home. These are devastating things. Disappointing is I didn't reach the top of Everest this year because of COVID, and I've got to
Hmm.
do it all again next year. Yeah, it's time, it's money, it's more training. That is disappointing. That is not devastating. That was a luxury I was living. And so, yeah, I mean, I really try to, part of this is to help people, figure out what is suffering or not. And to help release their suffering is how you set your metric. What is your metric that determines your suffering? If suffering to you is, and I get it, they're feeling pain, but COVID's one thing where they're so devastated their kid didn't get to go through an official graduation,
Yep.
like with pomp and that's disappointing.
Yeah.
Guess what? They're alive. They're alive. They graduated. They get to go on and lead lives. Like you've got to put things in perspective to ease your suffering, which gives you
Right.
happiness, which makes you more positive going into this world and puts your energy into solutions, not into suffering.
Yeah. No, it's such a cool recalibration tool of like, okay, here's where I am. Here's
Yeah.
where it should be, like in
Yeah.
terms
I
of
never
the
say it doesn't
spectrum.
hurt. And when things are disappointing to me, like I'm not gonna like, when things get ripped out or whatever, I'm like, I'll give myself a night to cry. I might drink a
Yeah,
little rosé, have a couple tears, but I'm
right.
like, no, you know what? You cannot. I refuse to put energy into things I cannot change. And that
Right.
that doesn't happen overnight. It takes so much practice to keep catching yourself, be like, nope, no, I'm going to put my energy into a pivot or a change or solution. I'm not
Yeah.
going to put it. And it takes a while until you get really good at it. So again, like, I was just trying to get to the North Pole. And last year it was just completely canceled 2 weeks before, like it was for Everest for me. And then
Yeah.
I went. And then we sat there for 2 weeks. Ice was too thin. And it's like, nope, go home. You got to try again next year. I was like, okay. I mean,
Yeah.
like at this
The
point in my
Charlie
life,
Brown football pole, huh?
yeah, I'm like, well, gosh, got to figure out how to do this again. But like, I know, I'm like, I have no control over this. I refuse to be devastated. It's disappointing. On to the next thing.
Yep. So on the other end of the spectrum, like that's such a great way to think about dealing with the bad side of planning and mountaineering. Like what do you love most about mountaineering? What's like, "Oh, okay, I'm excited. I just finished Aconcagua. I love this aspect of hiking. I'm gonna do it at the highest level for the next like decade, do the next highest mountains.
Yeah.
What's that big love factor with what's your relationship like with mountaineering?
Yeah, and I'll say, like, over the years, especially to do the Explorers Grand Slam, what starts out is your driving factor and what you love about it, it transitions and it changes. Because if it doesn't change, then a lot of times you end up very unhappy. It
Mm,
needs to you want to let it transform you, because I do believe that when I started this, again, it was this, oh my gosh, I'm actually pretty good at this. And I do think for me, it started out as another attempt to prove that I'm good enough for myself.
mhm,
And I only know that now looking back, um, because the way that it transformed me. So here I am, and I always love it. And I always went into it like, okay, well, if I make it, I make it, la la la. But then I really started making it. And then I started, like posting about it. And then it became a thing. And now I've got maybe a couple sponsors going. And the pressure started coming down on me like, well, I've got to get the summit. And I think it really was on Everest in 2021 where, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, and I love it. I love being on the mountain because, again, I can be fully myself. I
yep.
feel fully myself, and all this other clutter around us just moves away. I love being in a tent. I love shooting the crap with other people around and just
Yep.
working on like taking care of my body and getting to that next goal. It's a beautiful feeling. But it was in 2021 where all of a sudden I've been going through these rotations. It was horrible weather. COVID's everywhere. I'd been on the mountain for like 6.5 weeks, and my body was just dropping weight above about 22,000 feet. I mean, it doesn't even matter how much you eat at base camp, you just lose weight. And for the first time in my life, I went to do a day hike at a base camp. I was so weak, I had to turn around.
Is that
And
because your body's just working so hard to keep you at maintenance?
yeah, you and there's and I thought I was eating a lot, but I apparently I wasn't. And a really high altitude, yeah, my body just emaciates, and so I just was losing muscle mass. You lose strength, you lose. So yeah, so I turned around. I remember I went to my tent. I just started bawling. I was
Mm,
exhausted. And all the voices was just like, what are you doing here? I told you you don't belong here. You can't climb this mountain. You're insane. And then it started going on to, but if you are going to go up, then you should probably do Lhotse because other people are doing it. It's only 18K more, and all the real climbers are doing both. And then I realized then this other voice, this grip voice, just yelled at me. I was like, Buchanan, shut the F up. I was like, I'm sorry, but I've listened to this for however many years. And if you aren't good enough for yourself right now, I'm done with you. You are a dyslexic that became an aerospace engineer. You are literally climbing Mount Everest right now. And
yeah.
if that is not good enough for you, I am done. Good luck. I'm out. And
Yep.
I literally just started laughing. And I was like, okay, then I guess I'm good enough for myself right now. And that was the day. I was like, no more. And I went to my guide and I'm like, well, I don't know what's happening. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, you need to eat more. If your eyes are open, I want you chewing on something. So we doubled down on bars and all this stuff. And actually I had like 6 days before summit push. I built my strength back up. We were ready to go for summit. And then the Delta variant of COVID came up and over. All of our climbing Sherpa sick. And so everyone ordered off the mountain. The season was
And you're
done.
a day away from the summit?
Well, I am literally hours from leaving from base camp for summit bid. So
Oh,
that's
got it.
usually
Okay.
5 days. But we had people up at camp 2 and camp 3 already. And yeah, and it was over. And I was like, I'm gonna have to train another year. I'm gonna have to figure out how to pay for this again. But I literally, when I talk about purpose, I was like, okay, no, I came here. I learned what I came here to learn. And I right away with my outfitter, Climbing 7 Summits, I'm like, yeah, no, I'll be back next year. I'm doing this. And that changed everything for me at work and my profession and everything I do, where I finally understood that I needed to love who I am, where I'm at, and keep working on that. And it's this limitless feeling. And all of this had been leading up to that moment. And so now when I climb, it really is just a gift on top. I don't have as much pressure
Mm,
because yeah, like it's released me so much. Um, and it's more of that joy, and now it's more about I do love just pushing myself and seeing new things and trying new things, and I am never the same woman that goes into an expedition that comes out of it, because I learned so much about myself and other people. And so I just love I'm so in love with the journey now, like truly in
Yep.
love with the journey.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just incredible. Yeah, I think that is an interesting distinction of like, what is that? The person who loves walking will walk further than the person that like wants to go to a destination or something. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you really kind of figure out for yourself, you can do these long endurance challenges when you are able to be aware of those milestones along the way
yeah,
and how it's feeding your soul, growing you as a person. And so I always say, like, the summit is this blip on the map. The summit is a brief moment in time, like, woo, take a picture, that was cool. But it is in, I've met some of the craziest people I've ever met in my life on these journeys, but I've met, my best friends. I've met the most inspirational people I will ever meet at the
yeah.
farthest reaches of the earth. And so when you're open to the whole experience, every moment is just amazing. It makes it all worthwhile.
What are the people like who climb Everest? Do you have a lot of downtime to get to know them?
You've got like super eccentric type A people. I
Yep.
mean, I'm like, I'm type A for sure. Like I'm like, boom, execute, execute, plan, execute. But you've got people. Oh my God, Everest is a different one. Like, there's a lot of people on Everest that technically should, well, there's tons of people on Everest that technically should not be on Everest. And they probably won't be summiting Denali or even Aconcagua. So
Right.
there's a lot of people that are in love with the mystery of it, that, yeah, they've never put crampons on before, and they pay enough people and Sherpa to pull them up and push them up stuff. So I'll be honest, like, there are people I've encountered where, so at the top to Everest with me, it was a great moment with a really good friend of mine now, Naren, who is my guide, and Pasang, my climbing Sherpa. Like, oh my God, three of us. But I also was not like, it wasn't this a moment epiphany. It was kind of like a little disappointing, because I literally sat there. I was like, anyone can climb Everest, because I'd seen it.
Mm,
But it was still towards a bigger milestone. So I was happy to do it with the people that I did. But it took a little while. And I think for people who've really done the work to know the skills to be there, it isn't like this, oh my God, I can't believe I did it. It was like, nope, it was long. Yeah, there were difficult sections, but I did my job. I trained for this. The people who are like, oh my God, like right away, they're the ones who never thought they could ever make it to the top in the beginning.
yep.
But it is, but it is, what I do hope is it does teach a lot of people, like, hey, this is a great thing to do. Go learn the skills if you want to keep climbing. But I'll say, Denali, so much more rewarding. I like Everest, I was ready to go back the
Yeah.
next year. With Denali, I'd be like, so glad that it's done. I'm finally to the point where I'm like, I would go do it again. But for a while there, I was like, nope, I'm good. Glad I'm done with that
D-
one.
Denali fascinates me. Could you for a second like explain it at a zoomed out level how you go about climbing Denali? Because it's so remote.
Yes.
It
I mean, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And you'll take your little twin otter, you land on the glacier. You start on glacier.
yep.
And
Okay,
you
sorry.
are,
So highest mountain in North America, and you
yes.
have to fly into Alaska, a remote Alaska town, right?
Yeah, you base in Anchorage, usually you drive Talkeetna, which is adorable, by the way. And and if you don't want to climb, you don't have to. You can take a beautiful train and drop off in Talkeetna if you want. And then you can take a little prop plane and fly around it and see it. It's so massive. It is so beautiful. It is savagely beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
it is. I remember this point, this ridge near Washburn's Thumb, and I am looking out, and I was so teary and talking to my dad. And I was just like, it's one of those moments where a picture will never capture it. You don't get to see that unless you put in the work to be there. And that's a really rewarding moment. But you have got huge, you and your team are self-supported.
Yep.
I went with guys, I went with RMI at that point, and you carry in all of your group gear, your tents, your food, like all the stuff. You also have to carry out all your human waste. So you have these little CMC cans that you've got to carry it in, carry it out. And that's another one. It doesn't care if male or female, 120 pounds, 220
Yeah.
pounds, you are carrying your amount.
And so when you say carry, it's a backpack and a sled
And
too,
sled.
right?
Yeah. So you're 60-pound pack, 60-pound sled. It is brutal. And so that one, I definitely, for anyone doing that, I did a lot of work. I was learning to ice climb, rock climb, footwork, crampons, rope teams. And I went and did a training course on Mount Baker prior to it because I wanted to make sure that I was ready to go.
Hmm.
And again, not put my life or other people's lives in danger. I learned a lot of great skills doing that. So I was glad I did that. And it was so that one. I mean, I was really crying at the end of that one. It was a grind, and that one felt really, really good to have completed. And I did that one before Everest, and that was, I
Right.
asked my guide, yeah, I was like, am I ready for Everest? He's like, yeah, you're ready. I was like, oh, right.
Because
So
it had that like earned ingredient that maybe
I,
others.
yeah, I felt like I had earned a shot at Everest. Yeah.
Yep.
But I also did know I was going to go from July into that next leave, like that next March. I did in Vail. I started really more ice climbing, more, cramponing, just different things, more, rappelling, and really trying to get my skills dialed in that I showed up, you know, knowing what I was doing. And now, of course, when you go there, and I was there for 2 years, that first year, I was like, oh my gosh, I know all these other things I need to work on going into it in 2022. And so, yeah, there's so many phenomenal athletes and, yeah, just so much to learn from so many people. And there's always stuff to improve on and keep learning your skill set.
Yeah. I'd love to pick your brain on how you think about risk management. Because one thing that intimidated me just reading about Denali is how remote it is. And
Um, Yeah, but I mean, I guess there's a lot of remote areas. I mean, Antarctica is another one that kind of like, look, they've got some triage doctors down there, but talk about remote.
oh
If
my
something
gosh, yeah.
happens in that weather, I mean, you're not getting out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the risk management. I mean, I think that's another part of there's so much that you can do learning. Um, Practicing enough, being outdoors enough that you know your body well enough too. What
Yep.
is a serious pain? What is a normal pain? That helps a lot with the risk management of knowing your body, because that way you know, hey, this does not feel good, or hey, this is a normal pain I have in my left hip, or this is a normal headache. So I think that's a big thing you can take on, but you can do as much research, you can talk to as many people as you want, but there is that inherent risk.
Yep.
And that is part of the risk that you take. But just doing as much as you can to understand your own body and communicating with, your team, your guides, being prepared that way, I think is one of the key things you can also do.
What's your relationship like with your guides? Is it, sorry, yeah. How's the relationship with the guides?
I mean, it's going to be as good as you want it to be.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I always pick, like, I do a lot of research on who I'm going to go with, and for many years I went kind of with different ones from recommendations of like I was really lucky the first time we did Everest Base Camp to meet Jake Norton. And he was on the 2019 expedition with Dave Hahn that found Mallory's body, so to me, I was like, oh my God. And so he had always kind of stayed a resource for me and reached back like, hey, now I'm thinking about this mountain, what company, who do you know? And he'd be like, hey, here's a couple good guides. So for a while there, I would kind of go with people recommended. But then when I got introduced to Climbing the Seven Summits, I have been with them kind of ever since. And now the guides, they literally, it becomes like a family. And
Yeah.
so I'm about to go finish the Mesner's version of the Seven Summits. So I completed the Bass version with Kosciuszko, but Indonesia, Carson's Pyramid is a Mesner version. It's been shut down for 5 years. And so I'm going to be with CTSS. I'm like, okay. And so I'm like, hey, does Tendy want to go on that one? Or like, what is Tommy up to? And
Yeah.
so it is like everyone kind of becomes family, and just everyone in that whole community, you start to know who each other are. And it's like a high school reunion, like, oh, everyone's going to be at base camp now. And so it is this beautiful community. You also know the people to stay away from.
Yep.
That might be toxic and horrible. But those are the few. It is more just amazing community. And so you are going to get out of it everything that you want to put into it. You want to involve your guides. And you know, the other thing I really encourage, if you're doing a supported expedition, you need to hang out with your porters. You need to absolutely learn, like Sherpa are elite athletes, learn everything you can. You know, again, like on Aconcagua or Kilimanjaro. I remember in Aconcagua, the bottom part, you have the gauchos on their mules. They will carry your high altitude gear. And I will go over with my Argentinian guide, and we go sip, wine under the stars with the gauchos. And I spoke like every third word in Spanish I got, but
Yep.
just to experience that is you got to experience the culture and everything you're doing. You're going to get as much out of it as you put into it.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. I love Argentina. That's just a fun mental image to have.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I would definitely climb. I would climb any of them again. Like if someone
Yeah.
else would like pay for it, I would. I suppose,
Right.
but yeah, at this point I'd climb any of them again.
Um,
Such great memories.
in hearing you talk about that, it's an interesting point where like the it's such a small community. It feels like at that level.
Yeah.
Um, and I wonder, so you have your stats on this website, but it's like one of 20, fewer than 20 women to do the Explorers Grand Slam, one of 5 women to do so. And would you be the first
US
U.S.
women. I,
woman to do the Adventurers Grand Slam?
I am hoping so. Explorers Grand Slam is 7 summits, and then the last degree ski to the north and
Yep,
south. That's literally like 70 miles. But the Adventurers Grand Slam, which is even fewer. And I
yep,
know, like, it's so amazing, but it's that full ski from like a coastline. So that's going to be more like 450 miles. Now, after I complete the last degree ski to the North Pole, I will probably go do Antarctica because that's over land. That one's
yep.
doable. The Arctic and the North Pole, to be honest, I don't even know if it's even possible. Logistics companies do not support that anymore. I
Mm,
literally will have to put together my very own expedition, which is a whole nother feat, which I'm up for. But right now it's not supported. And with the ice melting, the struggle is real. I mean, we went there last year, just this last spring, and sat there while they tried to make a runway on the ice, and they couldn't do it. We're going to have to pull it back into March instead of April because of the melt. So it
yeah,
is one of those things that may not be possible at all. But so that's another pivot then. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go for it. But in it, I'm really going to document what's happening to our earth too. So
sure.
if I'm not successful in that, I'm successful in sharing the story. That
Yeah.
it's so yeah. I mean,
It,
I would love to be the first US woman to complete that.
and then on that, like documenting your journey, how do you think about what you want your legacy to be? I mean, you've accomplished so much, and if does being the first to do something motivate you? How do you think about that?
You know, no, I think the first to do something honestly helps with a platform
Yeah.
or a recognition to be able to do something greater, in my
Hmm.
opinion. And the thing greater,
Oh,
again, is to inspire others to learn grit for themselves and to motivate them to go on and to love themselves no matter whatever that goal is for them. That is the greater thing for me. And I just love showing and inspiring others through these tools of grit how you can accomplish amazing, fantastic, extraordinary things. But the most extraordinary thing that you really can accomplish, again, is to be good enough for yourself and love who you are and live authentically. So the top of Everest, first woman to do this or that, is just a symptom of the greater goal of living grit.
mm. It's just the cherry on top.
The cherry on top. Yes.
I love it.
Mini cherries. It's a big
Yes.
sundae.
Yeah, totally. Um, Yeah, it's just I would love to do some speed round questions with you before we wrap up.
Let's
Does
do
that
it.
work? Okay.
Mhm.
So, least favorite climbing hold.
One that gives. One that gives away.
Oh, great answer. Okay, do you think Mallory summited Everest?
I love that. So back to Jake Norton. Oh my God, I've picked his brain on this so much. He's forever hopeful. I'm forever hopeful. I love to think he did, but actually, really looking at the kind of gear they had, the conditions they went in, the lack of support, the odds are they didn't. But I like to think they did.
Yeah. I meant to ask you on that subject, like, who are mountaineers are there like historical mountaineers or current mountaineers that inspire you?
That is such you know what? I love that question. First of all, my dad always inspired me, but
Yep.
there are so many people now that are really out again, that are out right now trying to inspire others. I was just at an event with like Eric Weimeyer, who's the blind, and he accomplished these great things, but his main thing now is really helping others with physical disabilities achieve those things as well. He puts so much of his soul in out into the world. I love people really doing things like that. I met this amazing veteran. Her name's Christy Ennis, and I was on down in Antarctica with her, climbing on Vincent the same time, and she has a prosthetic leg from the knee down. She's getting
Oh
through
my
the
gosh.
7 summits, and she's doing so much for veterans. So I think there are so many amazing people, and then of course any of the women that brave through being the only woman, the first woman, and
Yeah,
you really think of the misogyny and the abuse they went through then to
right.
accomplish, because it's still, there are so many wonderful people on the mountain, and there's so many great mountaineering companies that so encourage women, but there's a lot of predators still on the mountain. So any woman I
Yeah,
completely admire and support. But yeah, I mean, there are just really amazing people climbing for fantastic causes, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of.
I love it. Well, Megan, where can people find you and hear more about your story?
Yeah, I would love it. So I am GGRIT, so G Grit. And that's my Instagram. That is my website. That's my grit team is my Facebook. But I would love for anyone to follow my journey. I like to capture just things, the good and the bad I go through, how I push through things using the tools of grit. And then, yeah, my upcoming climb to finish Mesner's version 7 summits. I'll be coming up at the end of September, doing all sorts of fun climbs and different things. So DM me if you have any questions. Like, I love inspiring, especially I do a lot of outreaches for neurodivergent, so especially love kids following me, and any questions they have, I'm so happy to answer.
Yeah, I love your Instagram. It's like a motivational diary. Like today I
I
feel
know,
this and
it's fun. I have a fun time with it too. So
oh yeah, it's so great. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Go ahead and check out Megan's social in the link below and her website, ggrit.com. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel too for future adventure interviews.